All right, welcome to part 1 of the Chapter 3 discussion. We're going to be demonstrating a number of things related to views today. Not maybe the most exciting topic to talk about, but definitely one that's important and one that we're going to be using quite a bit this semester. During the lead-in to this discussion, if you would like to go ahead and open up from the practice folders, the ArcDisplay Revit file. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that now, and then we're going to just kind of start introducing what it is we're going to be talking about. So by now you should already have a shortcut to the practice files folder on your computer that you've downloaded that came with the book, and we're going to be opening again Arc-Display for our discussion today. So once you've found practice files, scroll down until you see display, and then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to save this. We're going to give it a different name, put it in a different folder, preferably. And let's just call this thing Chapter 3 Practice. When you do save the file, make sure that you're using Save As. Otherwise, it's just going to save that same starter file that we opened up. And in the Save As dialog, remember, we're going to navigate to another folder, some folder where you're going to save your stuff. And to point out this options down here in the bottom right, this is something you might want to mess around with. Anytime you do a save as, you have that options tool, and we can set the maximum number of backups. So remember those backup files that it creates every time we click save. If you don't want 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 of those things loading up in your file folder, go ahead and just reduce that number to whatever you think a manageable number is, and then the oldest one will always drop off once that maximum is reached. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the Chapter 3 Practice. I put the year after it for this demonstration, and I'll just go ahead and click Save. So as you're doing that, we're going to be talking about views today. And views, you'll recall, are all listed in the project browser. So everything in this window right here, most of these things are views. Certainly the things at the top listed are views, and it starts off with floor plan views, and you can see that this particular drawing also has ceiling views, 3D views, and elevation views. We don't see any section or detail views in there yet. None have been created, but presumably if we do create something like that, it's just going to automatically add that to our project browser. So the topic we're going to start today with is duplicating views. That is essentially making a copy of an existing view that's already in our project browser. If you're a curious person like me, you're probably already wondering why, if we already have, for example, a floor 1 view, would we need a copy of that? And the answer to that is pretty long, but I'll keep it fairly short. The answer is, oftentimes we want to show different things in a view, and we want to create a separate view to accomplish that. One possibility might be we're showing in one view construction documents, how to build the floor, or how far apart to put things on the floor. And then in another view of the same floor, we might show things like furniture or electrical or something else, some other discipline that has nothing to do with the construction of the building. So we clear out all the unnecessary information in the copied view, leaving it in the original view, and then we can add other information to that copied view that we don't want to see in the other one. So by having the ability to control what's visible in each of those two views of the same thing, we have the ability to create 2 separate views for different purposes. So that's kind of where we're going with this today. So the first one we're going to look at, and we're going to go ahead and duplicate floor 2. Let's go to floor 2 first. Just double click on that, open it up. And you can see there's not a lot of detail in here, but there's some. There's a little bit of annotation. We see some grid lines. We see some the grids for the pool area as well, separate from that. And then we see just kind of the basic components, doors and windows in here already. So let's start by creating a copy or duplicate of floor 2. We're just going to right click on it in the project browser. We're going to say duplicate view, and we're going to do this first option here. You can see there's 3 different options under the duplicate command. The first one is just duplicate, so let's go ahead and do that one first. And it just does go ahead and create that second view of floor 2, but it just puts a copy 1 at the end of the name. Now we can always rename this to whatever we want, just by single clicking on it once and then clicking on it again to go into edit mode. You just type the new name in there. Just a word of caution, remember that view names are always alphabetized according to the first letter of the first word. So when you're thinking through your naming structure, if your office that you work for doesn't already have one in place, just keep that in mind, because once you get a lot of views in a project, it can get pretty hard to manage if they're just scattered all over the place randomly. We're going to go ahead and leave that name alone so that it stays next to floor 2 there. But if you zoom out, you'll notice right away that it doesn't look exactly the same as the original. If we go to floor 2 again, you can see that floor 2 has some annotations in there, some notes, and floor 2 copy 1 does not. So none of that came over, and the reason for that is it only copied the model objects and the datum objects like grid lines. It did not copy any annotations. If we did want it to copy annotations, let's go ahead and do this. Right click on floor 2 and we're going to say duplicate view. We would choose duplicate with detailing for that. And duplicate with detailing does what it seems like it does. It copies all of the parameters of the view, but it also brings over with it any detail lines or annotations. Right? So this is a good place to kind of pause and think about what are those other objects and why is there a distinction between those two types of duplicate. When we have annotations and detail objects in a plan view like this, or any view, those annotations, those other things that are in there, don't really exist in the model. They only exist in the view. So for example, if I were to add if I go to the Annotate tab and I were to add some dimensions, I can add a couple of dimensions like this, or I can add also on the Annotate tab I could add some text, and just put a few notes in there like this. That object would not be visible in any other view because it is either an annotation or a detail object. So the same thing applies to these detail lines right here. So if I use this tool right here to create a line in my view, that line is not a model line, it's a detail line. So understanding the difference between a detail object and a model object is critical because Revit treats them differently. And I'll just repeat it again. Model objects exist everywhere throughout the project. Any view can and should, or can, display a model object. We would see the same piece of the model in any view that we looked at. Any number of copies of floor 2 has the ability to see the wall. But this text object exists only in this view. That's why when we created the first copy of floor 2, because we told it not to include detailing, we just said duplicate, none of that detail objects, none of those detail objects came with it. Now, what happened when we created this view? Floor copy 2, we said with detailing, so it did bring the annotations over, right? It brought all of the existing annotations over that were in the view at the time, but you can see that the stuff that we just added to floor 2, this note, this detail line, this dimension, none of that stuff propagated to the copy. So that tells us that when you duplicate a view with detailing, it only brings over the detailing that exists at the moment you create that duplicate. But there is not a live link between those two views. That is a one-off copy that only happens once. And so if your intention is to bring over all of the dimensions into a copy of a view, it's always best to finish creating those dimensions, finish dimensioning, finish adding annotations, finish adding any other detail objects to that view before you copy it, because after you copy it, they won't exist in both views anymore. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. If not, jot yourself a note, bring it up in class, and we can kind of go through it in a little more detail if you like. If it does make sense, let's proceed on. Another thing to think about with multiple copies of the same space is that all of the objects, as mentioned, that are model objects like walls, doors, windows, plumbing fixtures, any other model object you can think of, changes to those within one view will be reflected in any of the other views. So if I decide I want to take this wall out, and it's going to do a lot of things that I don't want it to do, but between the second and the third room over, we're going to see that wall missing in all of our floor 2 views, and in fact in any view that we look at. This one is not showing it for some reason, and I don't know why, but there must be another wall there or something like that, why it's still showing here. But trust me when I say that wall is no longer there. There's a ghost of a wall. Looks like maybe there's an underlay turned on or some other thing that's happening beneath that. Might be the CAD file that was traced in this process. But any changes to the model, no matter where you are, affect the model, and those affect all the views that would view that, that could see that object. Okay, now just because we can see all of the model in any view doesn't mean that we have to or that we will. What do I mean by that? Well, if we had a bunch of plumbing fixtures in this bathroom here, for example, if there was a toilet and a sink and a shower, those would be model objects that would, by default, show up in every other view. However, you can hide them in any of the views. Okay, so let's run with that idea for a minute. Let's hide all of the doors we see in this first room here, this guest room 201, we'll call it. Okay, we're going to select this door right here. We're going to right click and say hide in view, element. Now, I'm going to get to the bottom of why we're seeing this ghost behind here. I'm actually going to hide this too. This is actually, if you select it and you look up here, this is actually the DWG. This is the CAD file. So I'm just going to temporarily, just to kind of keep this a little bit easier to look at, I'm going to hide this element by doing this right now. Okay, so we hide that guy. All right, so now that door goes away. Let's go ahead and hide this one. And we can actually do multiple. Hold down the control key and select multiple objects. Right click, hide in view, elements. So all of those go away. Okay, or seem to. Now we didn't delete them, we just hid them. Let's go ahead and go to the floor 2 copy 1. Notice that those doors are not hidden in that view. So light bulb should come on about right now. Aha, we can actually display different things in different views, and that in fact is the whole purpose really for creating copies of views. It's so that we can show different things. There's going to be a different emphasis in an electrical plan, for example, as opposed to a floor plan where we're trying to communicate the location of all the walls to the contractor, to the main contractor that's going to be building the building, putting up the walls, versus the electrician who's going to come along later and needs to know a completely different set of information. So we would emphasize electrical outlets and fixtures and different things to the electrician that the contractor, that the carpenter perhaps, doesn't even want to see, right? He doesn't want that in his view. So having that control over what is displayed is another of the key features of Revit. It's why we can look at one model and show so many different things, is because we have very, very fine detailed control over what we're displaying in each and every single view. So hiding elements is one way that we can control what's visible. There are a lot of other ways too, and we'll talk about a couple of them. One I want to introduce today is called Visibility Graphic Overrides. And Visibility Graphic Overrides, what I like to shorten to VGO. You're going to hear me use the acronym VGO quite a bit. Commit to memory that means Visibility Graphic Overrides, and that is right here in the Properties palette. Visibility Graphic Overrides, when you're in any view, you're going to see that. And this means that you can actually control by object type an object's visibility and appearance. Let's go ahead and dig in. So I'm just going to go to floor 2, the main floor 2 for a minute, zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to click Edit next to Visibility Graphic Overrides, VGO. Now usually with VGO I like to drag this window a little bit bigger just because It's easier to manage and you can see more stuff without scrolling. I'd recommend doing that anytime you open up a window for the first time. It will retain its size and shape on subsequent opens. But you can see over here on the left you have the categories of the objects, and there's a lot of categories you have in any given Revit model. Revit categorizes the model objects within it by type intentionally so that we have this control not only at the object level, the instance level, but also by the sort of category level. So in other words, we could hide the display of all of some type of object that belonged to a certain group, like doors or windows or floors or ceilings. But keep in mind that this is a visibility graphic override. The term override implies that we are overriding the default display behavior of that view. So let's test that. We're going to go ahead and just uncheck doors right here. Click that check mark, say OK, come back, and all the doors disappear in this view. And let's just make sure that that was a visibility override for just this view. We'll go to the second floor, other second floor view. You can see they're still displayed, and then the same thing with copy 2, they're still on. So that was a view level control over the display of doors. So again, another light bulb hopefully comes on at this point, and you realize the implications of having that level of control over your drawing. You can very quickly customize a specific view to just show the things that you want to see. But there is actually more to it than just controlling the visibility of those things. We can also get in and change what the thing looks like if it is visible. So if we leave the display of doors on, and all we want to do really is override, the line type or the line weight of that door, we can go in here and we can just change that right in here. So I'm going to change it to something really dramatic to make it obvious. And I really don't know, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a projection. We'll look at the difference there in just a minute. But I'm going to set it to 10, say OK, and then go back in here and take a look. And it didn't change it, so it may actually be in a different category. So we'll go back in here. That we've changed for doors. For lines that are being projected, we also have control over how lines look when they're being cut, and that's probably what will change it. So we'll change that to 10 also, say OK, come back here. And okay, so doors are kind of a bad example for this because they're actually displaying detailed lines. But if you hover over it, you can actually see the actual door, which is generally hidden from view. But you can see the thickness of that line type got really, really fat. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to change that back. But what I want to do is demonstrate it with walls instead, because these doors are kind of a special case. They don't actually display the door by default in Revit. So let's go ahead and just scroll down to walls real quick. Walls is a good example, and we are cutting through the wall, I know. So we're going to go over to this guy right here, override, and we're going to change the line weight to something a little less dramatic, maybe 6, just to kind of show that we have control over that level. So we come back, and now we see the thickness of all of the lines representing the walls just kind of plumped up a little bit. They got thicker. Okay. So we can display the line weight differently by view. Okay, so all of the walls are going to have a default line weight that is set somewhere else globally for all views. And then each individual view within your project can have its own sort of custom line weight for all the individual components in it. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can control line weight. Line weight is a really big topic, and we're going to talk about that a lot in all the architecture classes. More to come on that. We don't want to go too far into that rabbit hole at this moment, but just know that we have that control. And all of the things that we're doing today are view level controls, not global control over the visibility of things. So we have visibility graphic overrides. We have the right click and then the hide option. We can also override graphics in view, and this does something similar to what visibility graphic overrides does. It just kind of gives us a little bit different interface to do it. But if we override graphics in view, for example, by category, we would get a similar tool, but it would just be for that object rather than listing all of them. So there's just kind of just a little bit more granular control over a specific object category and how it looks. So we know that we can create a duplicate of a view without detail objects. We can also create a duplicate with all of the detailing. There's a third option, however, and we're going to look at that next, and that one is duplicate view as a dependent. Now this one is less frequently used, but sometimes what we have to do is create two views out of one. And this is a good application for this particular one. So let's go ahead and create two of these. We're going to create one dependent view of floor 2, and then we're immediately just going to do that again. We're going to duplicate a second dependent view of floor 2. So now we have two floor 2s under the main heading of floor 2. What are these for? Well, when you need to have a single view of a floor like this, but you also want to have two smaller, actually larger scale views because one doesn't fit on the sheet. Okay, so sometimes we have a building so large that even with our largest architectural sheet size, E1, it doesn't fit on the sheet at a reasonable size, so we have to break that building in half to make it fit at a scale that's, you can even see the detail that you need to. So the dependent views are actually children of the parent view, floor 2, and we would typically then at that point just sort of abandon floor 2. It's just sort of a house that the other two views are going to live in. But keep in mind that when they are dependent, they are copies of that floor 2 view in every way. So remember when I said that none of this stuff that we created over here, the dimension, the text, the detail line, would be visible in the other floor 2 views that we copied? And that's true. It is not visible here, and it is not visible here, but in a dependent view, you do have a live link to those detail objects. So this is actually an exact copy in real time of that floor 2. The reason it even exists, though, is because we want to cut it in half. So we want to use half for one sheet, the other half for the other sheet, typically. Let's go ahead and change the name of floor 2 dependent 1 to floor 2 east. Actually, let's call this one west. And you know where I'm going with this. We're going to make the other one east. Wouldn't have mattered, actually, which one we made, because we haven't changed either one yet. They are identical. And it's going to put them in alphabetical order anyway. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the process for cutting a floor in half, essentially. Another thing to remember with these main views and dependent views is that they all must have and do have the same scale. So let's go ahead and change this from 1/8 to 3/16 scale. And you'll notice right away that the other dependent views, the two dependent views, are also at 3/16 now. Okay. Now we're going to crop the views. And that's something we haven't really done yet. We're going to play around with this guy out here. This is called the crop region. And the crop region, it does require a little bit of explanation. So we're just going to kind of take a little bit of a detour right now as we create the cropped view. The crop region, as you can see, if we grab, and I'm on floor 2 west, so I'm going to do the left side with this one. If we grab the inner boundary of a crop region, the grip right here, and we pull it in, and let's just go ahead and pull it just shy of column line F. We'll just kind of stop right there. You can see that it restricts what we can see over here now, kind of like a viewport, right? You can really liken these things to a viewport. And if I pull this down and I pull this one up, I can really narrow down what it is that I'm seeing. And this is actually going to help me when I go to move this view onto a sheet eventually, right? It's kind of making it a lot more concise. It's taking up less space on the sheet. But it also limits what I can see out beyond the boundary of the crop region. Now the second one out here, this is actually what we call the annotative crop or annotation crop region. And this one only controls text and dimensions and other detail items. So not model objects. But we typically cannot move that annotation crop region in beyond the model space crop region. So it's always kind of out in the periphery like this. We're going to leave that one alone for now. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to the east view, except we're going to stretch it the opposite way. We'll come right up to the edge of column line F again with our left boundary. So something like this. So we're just shy of F, and then we're going to bring this in and bring this up. So now that one is all cropped down also. So now we have two separate views showing the same building but different parts of it. And we can easily now place these two different views onto different sheets and show that floor plan at a larger scale than we would have been able to otherwise. The next thing we're going to do is go to the parent view, and we're going to create what we call a match line. A match line is going to exist to show where one drawing would be relative to the other one. When you're in a larger scale drawing that only shows half of the floor, sometimes it's helpful to see where the other drawing is going to pick up, and that's basically what the match line is representing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a match line, and you're going to find that, like most things related to views, on the View tab. You'll find the match line right here in the ribbon on the View tab. We'll go ahead and just click that thing, and like most things that you have to draw, Revit's going to go into a draw mode, and we only have two options for this particular draw mode. We have lines or pick lines. We're just going to go ahead and use the lines command. We want to put that line someplace near the cutoff between the two sides. So I'm just going to put it right on column line F. And it's just a single line. It shows up as magenta until we click finish, and then that match line exists within our drawing. Now, it's not real obvious, and it's a little bit awkward that we have a grid line right there. So I could have moved it off of the grid line a little bit if I wanted to, but for the demonstration purposes, this will work just fine. So the next step in this process is just to add a reference on either side of that match line. And the reference is specific to those dependent views that we created, those two dependent views. One will be on the right, one will be on the left. One will be visible in the east view, the other one will be visible in the west view, as you'll see. So let's go back to the View tab, and View Reference conveniently is right under Match Line because those things are often used in conjunction with each other. The graphic flyout here shows exactly what we're trying to do. We're going to have one reference on the left side and one reference on the right side of that match line. Let's go ahead and click it. Now before you place the view reference, you can see it attached to your cursor here, we need to define what it is, right, and where it's supposed to go. So the target view in this case is going to be floor plan floor to east, and we're going to put that on the east side. But then we got to do another one. So we're going to go back to, we're going to hit escape, and then go back to the View tab, back to the View Reference, and then change this to west. So now we're going to put that on the west side. And then we're going to go to our dependent views and just kind of see what happened. So if we go to the east view, you can see if we zoom in on that area, there's the reference for the view that would be over here. And if we go to the west side, there's the call out or the reference for the view that would be over here. Now, if both of these views were dragged onto a sheet, those would actually be detail numbers. It'd be a detail / a sheet number, but that stuff's not populated because we haven't put any of these views on a sheet. And that's going to be true across the board with any kind of reference, like a section view or a call-out view. When you first create a section view, for example, it's going to give you the section view, it's going to give you the marker and everything, but the detail number and the sheet number are not going to populate until that view goes onto a sheet. So let's go ahead and put our dependent views on a sheet. We're going to go ahead and just follow this all the way through. We don't have a sheet in our plan yet. We don't have a sheet in our project. So we're going to right click on Sheets, say New Sheet, and then we're going to just leave it at this default E1. This one's already loaded. We could load another title block in there, but we're just going to leave it at that because it's easy. And then let's create, let's go ahead and move the East independent view onto the sheet. We simply grab it and drag it onto the sheet, and then we click to place it. So we have to drag and drop and then click. It's a little bit awkward. It's a little weird how the interface works, but that's how it works. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same. We'll just drag this one onto the same sheet. It's probably not going to fit, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. We'll drag this onto the same sheet. Normally we would put it on a separate sheet, but let's go ahead and just put it here. And now that both of those things are on a sheet, you can see that there is a detail number associated with each view right on the other side of the reference. And this one's kind of falling off the page a little bit, so we can't quite see it. But if I drag it over a little bit, you can see there's the reference number for the other one. They're both on sheet A101. There's detail 1, and there's a reference to detail 2. These are actually live links also, so when you see a reference like that, you can actually double click on it within the plan set. It should take you to that view. Okay, so just to recap, it's a fairly short first half video. We're going to resume in class when we meet again in person. But just to recap of what we did, we learned that all of the views within our plan set have the ability to be controlled, all of the graphics within them, whether it's model geometry or detail geometry, annotations and whatnot. We can control the visibility of those things pretty easily simply by, well, there's a number of methods, right? And we talked about a few of them. We talked about visibility graphic overrides, which exist in every view, independent of all the other views. All of the visibility graphic override controls that we have control just that view. It's worth mentioning at this point, at this moment, that under the Manage tab and under the Object Styles tool is where the default visibility of all of the graphics within your project live. So remember that VGO, Visibility Graphic Overrides, overrides something, the default view. This is the default view that it's overriding. So if we wanted to make a global change, for example, to the line weight of all of our walls, this is where we would do it, under Object Styles. Our walls and the default line weight for a wall in projection and in cut, the color of the line, the type of the line, even the material of the object type can all be set in Object Styles. We'll talk about that in more detail on another day. But just in case you were wondering, what are we actually overriding? How could we change that thing, the default setting of that thing? That's where we would do it, Object Styles. We also learned that we can hide an object individually, like this one door, simply by saying hide in view element, or we could hide all of such objects by saying hide this in the view by category, and then they all go away. What we didn't talk about yet, and I'll demonstrate it now, is how do we re-display those things? How do we get them to come back on? And that's this little Reveal Hidden Elements tool down here. It looks like a little light bulb and it's off right now. When we turn that on, the border of your view turns to this sort of magenta color, and then all of the hidden objects in the view are revealed. Okay, so at this point they are selectable. You right click, you say unhide in view, category, because I hid those ones by category, and then you can toggle that light bulb back off. Now it didn't turn on this one, did it? Because that was hidden by element. So I'm going to reveal again, right click on that one, unhide in view element, and now it's back. Okay, I think we'll leave it there for today. Definitely jot down any questions that you have that you want to bring up in class. If any part of this didn't make sense, you want to review it again, let's talk about it in class together. Make sure you get a screenshot of your work for this, save it, and we'll resume at this point in class the next time we meet.